I have so many fond memories of Thanksgiving, especially when I was just a kid, growing up and having the amazing food and just to spend time with my family. But as I growing up, there was only one incident during a Thanksgiving that was the most terrifying event in my life. Luckily though, this is the only known time that I ever had experienced anything like it. I know that some people had experienced something similar themselves, and this happened to me when I was just 20 years old, around 2010, so about 13 years ago. I was still living with my family at the time. I was in the process to find my own place. But it's not relevant to the story though. But anyways, my name is Serena. During the Thanksgiving, my mom had asked me to go to the store to get some of the last things for the Thanksgiving dinner, which were that the same day. And since I didn't had any other plans or anything other to do, so I was like, sure, why not? So I took my car and went to the local store and I managed to find some of the last things that was needed, even though there was only a handful of customers at the store. And most of the things that for the holiday was completely gone, like turkey and other things, but I managed to find what I was needed. But but when I was in the store, I did notice this middle-aged man that followed me around for the store. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence that he were in the same aisles that I was. After all, this was a Thanksgiving, and it was like I said, there was only a handful of customers in the store, and it's not unlikely that other customers would be in the store looking for some of the last things they themselves needed for the Thanksgiving holiday. At first, I brushed it off that since this man was in the same two aisles as I was. But as I was keeping around in the store for maybe about 20 minutes or so, I did notice that the man kept following me around to every single aisle. I was getting a bit worried, and so I decided to just grab the last things I needed, which things, thanks to it wasn't that much. I just went to pay my things and I went to my car, and as I was driving home, I noticed a car was following me every single turn, and as I looked in the rear mirror, I saw it was the same middle-aged man from the store. Somehow, he managed to follow after me to his car and follow after me. I was panicking. I had never even experienced anything like this. I mean, this was one of the worst emotions I ever had go to be experienced. Despite have been hearing a lot of scary stories online of these encounters like this, I had told myself I will never be experience anything like this, but after hearing this kind of stories online, at least I know what to do. But I called my mom and she told my dad to do something, and he just told me that he will take care of it and told me to drive home. Even I was like, is this actually okay? I was expecting maybe to tell me to go drive to the nearest police station, but it didn't. So I drove home. I As I was in the driveway, the car stopped behind me and the man got out of the car and walked up to mine. I was just about to step out of the car and he told me that he wanted to get my number, and before I could say any answer, my dad just showed up and told with a booming voice to him, "Leave my daughter alone." He almost screamed with a booming voice. And the man heard this. And he just hearing that from my dad, he could be pretty intimidated as it is. I mean, he was a big guy. Like, It was like if he has been a bodybuilder or a construction worker his entire life, which wasn't any of that, but still. So hearing my dad's second time of his voice, he told the man to simply leave and never approach me or anyone else like this ever again. Hearing my dad's booming voice like this a second time, the man just simply quick stood up and ran into his car and took off. Luckily for me, though, I did report this to the police the next day, and I even gave them the license plate of the number of the man's car, which I had thanks to my dash cam from my own car. So yeah, this was my only experience was any creepy encounter during any particular holiday, especially for Thanksgiving. And even though my dad looks like a big scary man, but he isn't even like that. He's just a big teddy bear. But he wouldn't hesitate to scare people, defend them if needed. So to the man who's followed me home from the store, let us never meet ever again, and I hope you don't do these things to anyone else. Thank you. A few years ago, I had the unfortunate to be going through the most creepiest experience when it comes to the one of my favorite holidays of the year, Thanksgiving. It happened around 2017. I was about 21 years old. My name is Daniela. It happened around the time when my family were having Thanksgiving together. I was actually in college, but I was home for the holiday, and I actually came home just one day earlier. And when I came home, my parents actually had told me that they had invited our next door neighbor, who was single, who had lost his wife about a year earlier. He was actually in his early 50s, and his name was Alan. My family had been living next door to him in my whole life, so I was actually aware who he was, and even though his late wife was the most amazing woman that ever is, she was like almost like a grandmother type. She was so beloved by everyone in the neighborhood. But anyways, I didn't mind that my parents invited him. I mean, like I said, I have known him my whole life so far. But the day that actually happened, he came over, and just before dinner was even finished, we were in the living room doing some small talk before dinner was finished. And he started to do some statements. He told me that was beautiful, which I actually heard from many people, so it was not like the first time I heard it. But well, there was one comment that really stood out the most. He asked me if I was interested in older men like himself. I was really not prepared for this kind of question. In fact, I had never been even asked of this kind of before, so I didn't know what to say. But I told him that I wasn't. And I was actually already in a relationship with a guy who was around the same age, and we were actually in the same college. But I just ignored that comment from the question from Alan. But he didn't get the hint and continued, and even during dinner, he sat next to me, tried to act the same, even though it's some ways that even my parents would have noticed. But after dinner, it was just me and Alan. We were sitting in the living room again while my parents took care of the dishes. He went to go so far to ask me if I was interested to go out with him. But I said no. I said that I already had a boyfriend already. But he didn't believe me. I continued, and I said firmly, Alan, please stop. That brought my mom's attention. She walked in and saw all what Alan did, and she told him to stop. But Alan said it wasn't anything. But I interrupted and said what he's been doing. And even my dad's like, Alan, please leave our house right now and never talk to my daughter ever again. And stop being such a creep to her. And after he just stood up, he just left. He didn't say a single word. He didn't even try to argue with my parents at all, especially with my dad. Afterwards, I told my parents more detail what he had been doing and tried to act around me. They knew that I was dating a guy already. And in fact, I haven't met them also, so. But when I told them what Alan tried to ask me out, that he didn't believe me, but that my dad told me not to worry about it. He will make sure that Alan stay away from me. Even though a few days after Thanksgiving, Alan actually tried to approach me again, and I told him to back off or I would call my dad, and that made him stop. And I eventually learned from my parents that Alan moved out from his house about a month later. Good grief, because that was probably the most creepiest neighbor I had ever experienced. But the thing is, even when his wife was still around, he was always helpful to my dad, always kind to me. But I think maybe he could have been like that even his wife was still around. So I don't know where Alan moved, but goodness that he's gone. So Alan, I don't want to see you ever again. So please, if you see me, stay away. I have so many fond memories of Thanksgiving. I mean, I really love this particular holiday. To enjoy the good food, to spend time with my family. And but there is one time that was the most creepiest of all my previous Thanksgivings in my whole life. This took place last year around 2022. My name is Emily. I was 24 years old at the time, even though I had moved out by this point, but I always went back to my parents' house to celebrate the holiday with my parents and my younger sister, Charlotte, who was around the time 22. And this particular year, Charlotte had invited her boyfriend, Kevin, which she had been dating for since her senior year of high school, I believe it was. And I actually met him a few times before, even though I did have the feeling that Kevin was a bit weird. And before then, I should mention this. He actually had been hitting on me even when Charlotte wasn't around or even didn't notice it. I didn't like it, but I never mentioned it to my sister or my parents because I didn't want to cause any particular scene, so I always kept my mouth shut about this. But I should have mentioned this to my parents, especially my sister, even before all this happened. But if I knew how far he would go, I would have told my family about this way longer earlier. And so, especially this. But during the dinner, just before, my parents was working together to prepare the food, at least that's on the last of it. So I was sitting in my old room reading when I heard a knock on the door. And there was Kevin. He asked if he could come in. I said, sure, why not? I mean, he was my sister's boyfriend, so I wanted to at least act friendly to him and more, at least have a decent conversation. Despite he was a bit weird and that he has been hitting on me, we could actually even have a decent conversation from time to time whenever we did meet. So he stood by the door and we just start talking normally and just like things have been going lately, which like how my work has been so far, and I don't mind that. I mean, it's the common things I've been asking. But one simple day, suddenly, one topic that I was expecting to happen. He did ask me if I have found a boyfriend yet. which I said no, I was single and I wasn't even looking for a guy right now, which is true. I prefer to just simply be alone. But he then started to get the hints that he could be a better boyfriend for me, but I literally knew this would happen. But I told him that he was dating my sister and he shouldn't be cheating on her. But Kevin said with a smirk that he has already done that already with others. And I didn't know what to believe. And he told me that I wouldn't even tell my sister no matter what. He would, if I did, he would just tell my sister that it was just a lie and I was jealous at my own younger sister. Hearing this from him made me mad. But what he didn't know that I was doing this as a recording of all of this. Right soon after that, when he started asking me about if I had a boyfriend, I knew something was up. So I started my phone that was hidden and I started recording. So it went like that. But when we were having dinner, he acted normally as nothing had happened. And I was planning to reveal the whole thing to my family, but not until at one certain point. After we had our dessert, Emily, my dad, had asked Charlotte if she had any plans of getting married with Kevin. Charlotte told that they were something they had talked about, but suddenly I had enough. I actually had my phone in my lap with the speakers on, and I had the record the play on. I had this whole conversation prepared. Just push the button of the play on the plate, and when I did, the whole conversation was played out, as was what Kevin said earlier. Everyone went silent. Kevin looked as pale as a ghost. Afterwards, Jonathan demanded to know from him what he meant by it, and he tried to make some excuse it was a lie, and that I was the one hitting on him. But I told the whole thing and the previous events to my family, what he has been doing and acting. But now it was too late. I smiled, and when Kevin realized his game was over, and Charlotte told him they were done. They were over. And my dad told him to leave the house and never talk to either of his daughters ever again. And he could even argued, so he just simply left the house. I felt so much relieved. Charlotte immediately apologized to me for what Kevin had done, but I just simply told her it was okay. He was gone now. And even my parents had told me that I should have told them earlier, but I told them back that I didn't even knew if they would have believed me. It would have been my words against his. So my parents understood that would have been a little bit argued. There would have been a lot of argues and hard to believe without any actual proof. But now I had the recording. I was just happy about it. But a week later, I actually heard from a friend that Kevin, of the other girls that he was seeing behind Charlotte's back, found out about his cheating, and I don't even know how. Maybe that someone knew about it and told some of the girls that he was seeing. I don't even know. But if that was true, maybe. But good thing too, though. Because right after they found out about his cheating, all of them dumped him. And from what I heard, he had a hard time to find a new girlfriend, which after what the news about him spread so far in our town, well, I would say he brought this to himself. If he had stayed faithful to Charlotte, none of this would have happened. So maybe one day Kevin will find someone to be with, but at the moment, I really doubt it. And Charlotte, though, after her breakup, she decided to just simply be staying away from dating scene for a while. But now that has been a year now, so I can tell she is dating a new guy, and he is way better than Kevin, much better. And Kevin, about him, well, last I heard, he still struggles to find a lady in his life. So yeah, and I can also mention I'm also been seeing a guy and it's going well between us. So, Kevin, please never talk to me or Charlotte ever again. Thank you for that.